Last time you heard their voice, you didn't know it was the last time. That's the part that keeps looping in your mind. If someone had taken you by the shoulders and whispered, "Listen, this is it," you would have paid a different kind of attention. You would have memorized the pauses, the way they laughed, the tiny noises in the background. You would have frozen the moment, stretched it, recorded it, worshipped it. Instead, it was ordinary. A phone call on the way somewhere. A quick check-in. A "we'll talk later." Maybe it was a small argument, a tired reply, a distracted "yes, yes, I'm listening." You didn't know you were walking out of that sound forever. Now, in the quiet of this season, their voice is louder than anything. You hear it in echoes, in certain words, in songs they used to hum without realizing, in phrases you picked up from them and still use, like a language you both shared and that nobody else quite understands. Christmas makes it sharper. The world is louder, but inside you, the old silence grows. Christmas carols in the supermarket, crowds talking in the street, laughter in houses you pass by. And threaded underneath all that noise, there is the sound you are straining for, the one voice that will not come back. Psychology talks about auditory memory, the way the brain stores sound. The truth is, your brain wasn't prepared to archive that last conversation as final. It filed it away as one of many. So now you rummage through your mind like someone searching for a tape in a box that was never labeled. You press play on every memory and listen too hard, trying to squeeze clarity out of something that was never meant to carry this much weight. Sometimes you wonder, have I already forgotten what they sounded like? That thought terrifies you. You try to reconstruct it. You mimic them in your head. You remember the way they said your name, the small sound they made before speaking, the sigh, the throat clearing, the tiny laugh at the end of a sentence. But memory fades. That's what memory does. And the more you chase it, the more slippery it feels. You start to fear not only the loss of the person, but the loss of the sound itself. I can't remember, you tell yourself. What if I'm remembering wrong? What if this voice in my mind is just a replica I've edited over time? You might listen to old voicemails or recordings, if you have them. You press play, your heart pounding in your chest, as if you are calling them back from another world. Hearing their voice can feel like being stabbed and embraced at the same time. There's relief. There you are. I knew I wasn't making it up. And then there's the aftershock. You're gone, and this is all I have. Sometimes you can't bear to listen. You save the file, but never open it. The icon sits on your phone or your computer like a small locked door. You're not sure you're ready to go through. Just knowing it exists becomes a strange comfort. Sometimes you listen on repeat, even when it scrapes your heart raw. The part of you that hurts and the part of you that refuses to let go fight inside your chest. You are not crazy for doing this. You are not weak. You are simply a human being whose attachment system was built around someone who left the world before you did. When you lose a voice, you don't just lose sound. You lose a function. Think about it. Their voice did things for you. It calmed you, annoyed you, challenged you, teased you, grounded you. Even in silence, knowing you could reach for it was a form of safety. If I really need them, I can call. If something happens, they're one phone tap away. Now that safety line has been cut, and your nervous system feels it. That's why your chest tightens when you go to dial their number, even if you stop yourself. That's why seeing their name in old messages can deliver a shock that feels almost physical. Your mind is catching up to a reality your body still refuses to accept. Then comes December, with its own soundtrack. Maybe there's a Christmas song they used to sing off-key. Maybe there's a movie they watched every year. Maybe there's a phrase they said, Something silly, like, "Don't eat the chocolates before the 25th." And now those words are ghosts that bump into you in the supermarket aisle. Suddenly, the entire season is a series of triggers. Each one says the same thing: they should be here. In psychology, triggers are not the problem. The real struggle is what you do with them. You might try to avoid everything, turn off the music, stay away from old places, refuse to watch the films you shared, block out anything that might wake the pain. Avoidance feels like control at first. If I never hear that song again, I won't fall apart. But grief doesn't disappear because you mute the world. It sits behind the closed door, growing heavier, waiting for one crack to slip through. On the other hand, you might throw yourself into the memories. You listen to their songs, cook their recipes, speak about them constantly. You keep them alive so fiercely that sometimes you forget to notice that you are still alive too. Neither extreme gives you peace. What you are really trying to negotiate is this question: how do I live in a world where your voice is only in my head and not in the air? There is no easy answer, but there are small shifts. One of them is this: stop judging how you are grieving. You might think, I should be over this by now. I should be stronger. I shouldn't still cry when I hear that word, that song, that accent. But grief doesn't care about your timetable. It moves on its own clock. The last time you heard their voice is not just a memory of sound. It's a landmark your mind keeps circling back to because that's where your story with them broke. You're standing there, in that conversation, trying to renegotiate reality. If I answered differently, if I hadn't hung up, if I had called again, maybe. That is the brain's attempt to find control in something uncontrollable. What you are really looking for is not the ability to change what happened. You're looking for some way to feel less powerless, to believe that there might have been something you could do, because accepting that there wasn't is almost unbearable. If you could sit across from a therapist right now and say, "The last time I heard their voice," you might find that what follows is not just sadness, it's also regret. I was impatient. I was distracted. I was irritated. I didn't say I love you. I ended the call too fast. But here is a truth you need to let sink in. You did not live that moment knowing it was the last one. You lived it as a normal human being, living a normal day. You were allowed to be tired, rushed, imperfect. The fantasy that you should have performed a perfect goodbye is cruel. It punishes you for not having information you didn't have. If they loved you, they did not need your last conversation to be flawless to know you cared. Their image of your relationship was built over years, not a single call. Christmas, with all its emphasis on togetherness, can make your imperfections feel heavier. You see people posting smiling photos, cherishing every moment, and you might feel like you failed some invisible test. But most of those pictures hide their own regrets, their own half-finished sentences, their own unspoken words. You are not alone in this kind of pain. You are just more honest about it right now. Tonight, think about that last time you heard their voice, not to torture yourself, but to rewrite the way you hold it. Instead of asking, "Why didn't I know?" ask, "What did this moment actually contain?" Maybe it contained an ordinary love, the kind that doesn't need dramatic declarations. Maybe it contained a routine that only happens in stable bonds. Maybe it contained irritation, which you only feel when someone's presence is a given. All of those are signs of closeness, not failure. You can also add something new to that moment. From now, from the present, you can speak to them in your mind, not as if you can change the past, but as if you can complete it. I didn't know that was the last time. If I had, I would have told you again that you mattered to me. So I'm telling you now. I'm telling the memory of you, the part of you that lives in the way I act, in the choices I make, in the love I give. This isn't magical thinking. It's psychological integration. You're allowing your heart to say what your circumstances never gave you the chance to say. You might also choose a sound, a song, a phrase, a line they loved, and turn it into a ritual rather than a landmine. Maybe every Christmas, you play their favorite track once. Not all night, not on repeat, just once, deliberately. You sit down, you listen. You let the tears come if they need to. You let the warmth come too, if it appears. And when the song ends, you tell yourself, this hurts because it mattered. I will carry both, the pain and the gift. Over time, the intensity will change. The voice in your memory may blur around the edges, but the feeling it carried doesn't vanish. It transforms. You may find yourself using their expressions, telling their jokes, giving advice the way they used to. You may hear them in your own voice when you comfort someone else. That, too, is a form of continuation. There's a strange kind of healing in realizing that you did hear their voice for the last time, and then you didn't die with it. Your world broke, and yet here you are, breathing, even if each breath feels heavier than before. Survival is not betrayal. Smiling again one day will not mean you love them less. Laughing at Christmas again will not mean you forgot. The last time you heard their voice is not the entire story. It is a chapter that ended abruptly. The pages after that are messy, full of crossings out and ink stains. But they are still pages. They are still being written, and you have more power over how they read than you think. You can choose to let that last conversation define you as the person who didn't do enough, didn't say enough, didn't know enough. Or you can choose to let it remind you that every ordinary moment may matter more than you think. Not in a panicked way, but in a tender way. So this Christmas, when the lights feel too bright and the silence feels too loud, try this. You pause. You take a breath. You picture them, not in the hospital bed, not in the coffin, not in the last painful days, but in some ordinary moment when they were fully themselves. You hear, as best you can, the way they once said your name. You let your heart ache. You don't rush it away. And then you let another sound enter, the voices that are still here. The people who are alive around you now, even if the circle is smaller, even if the room feels emptier. You may not always feel ready, but slowly, gently, you are allowed to turn toward the living without feeling like you're turning your back on the dead. The last time you heard their voice was an ending you didn't know you were living. But the way you live now can be your answer to that ending, not by erasing them, not by drowning in them, but by letting the love you had move through you into something new, kindness you give, patience you didn't have before, depth you only learned because you lost. Their voice may no longer exist in the air, but it echoes in your choices, in your reactions, in the softness you show someone else who is hurting. And maybe, in the quiet of some future Christmas night, you will notice that the memory of that last time doesn't strangle you anymore. It stings, yes, but it also carries something gentler. I didn't know it was goodbye, but I loved you across thousands of hellos. And I am still here, carrying you with me, every time I choose love over fear. That is how a voice outlives its final word.